Most people think outbound is spamming thousands of messages a day, hoping that somebody books an appointment. But in this video, I'm going to be breaking down our 8-part flywheel that allowed us to scale $2 million months with outbound prospecting. And I'm going to show you what it looks like start to finish, having successful outbound and scaling it for your business. So starting out, we are going to look at our outbound sales foundations. And starting off, we really need to understand the psychology of outbound. And it really comes down to timing, pain points, and positioning. And you need to understand buyers are more receptive when they're already thinking about a specific pain point, which means we need to have multiple different pain points when we're sending our outbound messaging, or we have such a general outbound message that allows us to have a little bit of discovery and actually uncover pain points. And then after that, the biggest thing is tracking metrics that matter. We want to be tracking our opens, we want to be tracking replies, connects, and at the end of the day, it's all about how many appointments you're setting on a daily basis. But the biggest thing is you need to have a resilient mindset. Outbound is about the law of large numbers, and consistent daily effort is going to compound into those predictable results. And the biggest thing is learning from your rejection, because at the end of the day, rejection equals feedback. And you need to start rejection reframing. Position that no when you message somebody as data that is going to remove fear and build resilience, allowing you to continuously improve your outbound system that is going to ensure your success. And then getting into those daily outbounds, you need to have those non-negotiables. And that is you or a team member committing to a fixed daily outreach activity no matter what. Because like I mentioned, the compound effect is real, and those small daily actions are going to snowball into a full calendar. Discipline is always going to be better than motivation, and you doing that every single day is building that habit pattern that is going to take you to the next level where you don't need to just rely on inspiration. And then lastly is you need to have that control bias. And when you control your activity and your outreach, you are going to actually feel like you are in control of your business and your results. If you're doing 100 outreach messages a day, and you're making 1 sale a day, all you need to do is double that to then make 2 sales a day. So at the end of the day, it is all about your numbers, because once you know your numbers, you are going to have a fixed outcome based off of what you're doing every single day. So now that we understand what outbound looks like in terms of the foundational process, we need to actually identify your ideal customer profile and understand that buyer psychology. And the first thing you are going to need to do is identify who is your ideal customer. Just saying that you help businesses scale with AI is not going to do it. You need to have a very specific ideal customer profile. And then from there, you're going to be able to understand who is actually a red hot lead. And you need to have selective attention. People are only going to notice offers that match their immediate needs. And when you have an ideal customer profile, you're going to be able to put a message in front of that person that is red hot, ready to go. And your messaging is exactly what they need at that specific time. And you can see here, if that lead is not a red hot lead ready to go, you need to then identify, okay, if they're not a red hot lead that is actively seeking your specific solution, you need to then understand who is considered a warm lead and what specific situation are they in. Warm leads are usually going to be problem aware individuals, where red hot leads are usually solution aware individuals, and they're actually looking for a solution. And then you have your cold leads, and your cold leads are going to be people that are most likely They're not problem aware, they're not solution aware, and you need to create that awareness for your specific product. But that's going to be what allows you, that when you really understand who your customer profile is and what situation they are in, if they're a red hot lead, a warm lead, or a cold lead, allows you to have the right communication with those individuals, warming them up for that specific call. And then the last thing that you really need to think about is who are you actually talking to and who's on the other side of that conversation, because the authority bias is real. Are you talking to a legitimate decision maker, or are you talking to an initiator that is going to require a different set of messaging because they are going to be acting on the behalf of the decision maker, but they are going to have different emotional pain points than the actual decision maker will. And again, that is going to get us back into our pain point resonance, which is the brain is going to react more strongly to specific problems than those vague benefits. And as long as we understand who our ideal customer profile is and what level of lead they are at, we are going to be able to tailor a very specific conversation based off of who that individual is and what specific pain points they have. Now, getting into our third spoke of our outbound flywheel is going to be our messaging frameworks. And if we look at these two messaging frameworks, we have our bait and switch method, we have spear phishing, and then we do have a couple of other additional techniques, but we really focus on these two. And that's what your opener is. So a bait and switch opener is going to be a very general message. If I'm talking to a chiropractor, I might say something very vague that says, hey, do you offer decompression plans at your clinic? Because I want to get the conversation started. Spear phishing is going to be a little bit more direct. Hey, I was wondering if you'd be interested in how I help chiros contact 15 patients every single month. Now, we do have a few other techniques that we do cover in our full outbound training, but this is what the framework looks like. First and foremost, you are going to be starting your conversation, and you are going to be needing to choose what specific framework that you are going to be picking. If it's bait and switch, you are going to get into your conversational opener, you're going to transition into your valuable pitch, and then you are going to close and move to the next person. From here, you're going to also decide, okay, maybe I'm doing spear phishing. So from there, you're going to have your direct approach with a very direct pitch in terms of what you do, closing that person into an appointment. And now we get into some of our additional tactics. So some things to think about are going to be pattern interrupts, question first DMs, and value-led micro commitments. These are all tactics that we use inside of our outbound to ensure that we are getting the best response rate and the best booking rate as possible. And these are going to be additional tactics that you implement into your spear phishing or bait and switch conversations. And then lastly, we are going to talk about our looting process, which means collecting responses and then from there extracting angles that actually triggered your reply to then refine your new openers and stronger call to actions. And this becomes its own loop where you are then taking all of these different things, you're taking your responses, you're improving your openers, you're adding in these different additional techniques to make sure that your loop is closed and you are booking as many appointments as possible. Again, really thinking about, are you using a bait and switch or spear phishing method? Are you actually resonating with specific pain points? Are you using different pattern interrupters to make sure that your emails and your DMs are actually getting open? And are you getting some kind of micro commitment in your messaging to psychologically get them closer to booking that appointment? And a couple examples for you are right here, where you have a bait and switch conversation, where this is a very conversational entry into a conversation, or something more along the lines of spear phishing, which is a direct pitch and then a voicemail drop, which you're using the exact same principles, but in voice form. And again, you could use a spear phishing approach with this. You can use a bait and switch approach with a voicemail drop. It is just a different mechanism, something that not a lot of people use to actually get in front of decision makers. And then lastly, an example, cold email, still applying this into our framework loop so that we are picking our specific method of outreach and then implementing and improving based off of additional tactics and our looting process to continuously improve. So now that we have our specific messaging in order, we can then start applying this to our social prospecting. And there are a lot of different ways that you can be doing different social prospecting. You have LinkedIn, where you could actually go out there and use a software, or doing something like Facebook, where you're adding friends, and then once they accept your friend request, you can send a DM. Or what I like to do, which is if they don't accept your friend request, go out there and hit them on IG or X, where you are constantly staying in front of one lead. If we go back inside of here, if we've identified our ICP and we have a list of 1,000 ideal prospects, outbound prospecting is not going out there and saying, hey, I'm going to send 1 million cold emails every single month, hoping somebody responds. It's building an ideal customer list and then using every single one of your outbound strategies to get in front of these individuals. Again, if somebody doesn't reply to you on Facebook, go on X, go on IG, like, follow, comment, send another DM on a different platform, and use everything that you can to get in front of those individuals. And one thing I will mention is the reciprocity principle is important. You need to be liking, commenting, adding people as friends, connecting with people before your DMs to prime that person to respond. Don't just find somebody on Facebook and then send them a DM. You're going to end up in spam and they're not going to reply. And then another big thing is also that omnipresent approach, because we want the familiarity bias and that repeated exposure where they saw you on Facebook, they saw you on IG, they saw you in a group, is going to build that subconscious trust. And you could even do retargeting, not something that we're going to teach in this specific flywheel, but it is a layer where if somebody hits your profile, then retargeting them on top of your outreach. And then lastly is going to be using that permission-based psychology. If somebody doesn't reply to your DM, comment on their post and say, hey, can I DM you? And it's going to create that buy-in before you actually pitch them. And if we look at a conversation of what this looks like, you can see right here. Hey, saw you hit our page. You building something right now or just poking around? You can see that it's more of a bait and switch opener where we are just prompting a specific conversation. We're not going right in for the kill. We're having a little bit of a conversation, seeing what they're building, and then from here, asking a little bit more about their offer, and then offering them to apply and book a call with our team. And that is what it looks like using those different social prospecting strategies, but really thinking about outbound prospecting as hitting one person on multiple different platforms, not hitting a lot of people just on one platform. Let's get into our fifth spoke in our 8-part outbound flywheel, which is list prospecting. We talked about social, and list is going to be the exact same thing. You can see we have an example workflow here where when we are uploading our list into our system, we're going to be hitting them with multiple different points. We're going to send them a text. We're going to email them. We're going to do a voicemail drop. We're not just relying on cold email. And you can see an example flow here is yes. First, on day one, we start off with an intro email. This is going for our traditional bait and switch messaging. But from there, we're going to layer in voicemail drops. And then from there, social DMs and social outreach, where you have your list, but we're hitting them on multiple different platforms, layering in text messaging, layering in different types of content, and then finally utilizing other platforms like Lemlist, like High Level, like Instantly to continuously hit this list with multiple different types of messages. But the biggest thing is stringing every single one of these together, not only using one of these specific things. A lot of people will set up Instantly, but they only send one email, and then they might send one a month later. But if you layer in voicemail, if you layer in social, you layer in different case study emails and different types of content, you are going to prompt a better response. And that really comes down to our multi-channel memory recall. Prospects exposed across all different platforms, so you have email, SMS, voicemails, DMs, are going to recall you and your brand faster. You also have the Ziegler effect, which is that unfinished interactions like unanswered voicemails and follow-up emails are going to keep the attention alive. So even if somebody doesn't respond, we continuously want to be poking them. And then lastly is that people reply to the consistency bias. That repeated outreach is going to build a sense of brand and serious, reliable trust where they are eventually going to reach out and take action. And then part 6 is actually booking appointments like a pro. You've now mastered your social prospecting, your list prospecting, and the actual conversations that are taking place. And we want to make sure that we are getting as many of these appointments that are on our calendar showing up for calls, ready to buy. And it is really going to start when you book that appointment. Getting into booking an appointment, the first thing you need to think about is scheduling that client's time in your calendar. And you really need to be conscious of the time respect psychology, which is making sure that you are booking that appointment on the client's schedule, not on your schedule. And that is going to signal deference and increased compliance that you are there to serve that customer, not the other way around. And before we send that calendar invite, the biggest thing that we are going to be needing to confirm is that specific time zone of that customer. We are going to make sure and double check that the time zone that you are plugging in and the time is the correct client's time zone, to make sure that, number one, when they get that invite, that it is for the right time when they are free. And that is one of the biggest mistakes that you can make, is assuming that when they're booking that it's in your time zone. And we have the endowment effect, which is once a slot is confirmed, most people are going to show up for that appointment as long as it's booked properly and they feel like that time slot is theirs and that they just secured that time. Now, getting into the actual appointment reminders, the first thing that you do need to remember is loss aversion, which is that reminders are not, hey, make sure you show up on the call. It's always going to be reminders highlighting what they're going to miss if they don't show up. Now, we're going to send that 24 hours before the appointment, 1 hour before the appointment, and then obviously you are then attending the appointment. And one thing to think about in whole is from actually booking the appointment to having a live appointment should not be more than 48 hours. And if it's taking more than 48 hours, the chances of that person showing up is going to decrease. Now, let's get into the 7th spoke of our outbound flywheel, which is objection handling and follow-up. And we need to think about a few different things. Number one, at the top of the pyramid is emotion. And your goal is to build trust because that is going to overcome emotion. We then need to identify what is our objective because that is going to erase any of the doubts, shape the lens, and keep them hooked into the actual conversation. From there, we look at how is our approach. We need to address, reframe, and then redirect the conversation back to the only thing that matters, which is booking an appointment. And we are going to be utilizing different tactics, which are key phrases and a sales battle card to make sure that our approach is proper. We're testing out different strategies and that it all ties back into our objective in handling that client's emotions. So starting off with our objection flow is going to be our first objection, which is going to be, I already have somebody. And it is a yes or no question. Do you know who they're using? And if you understand who they're currently using, you can then reframe that objection and advance the conversation because you have clarity on what they're specifically doing. But if you don't know who that provider is, you need to probe the conversation for more information so that you can then reframe that objection and again, advance the conversation. Getting into a second objection, I'm too busy. No? Okay, probe for more information. If you don't understand why they're too busy, you can simply ask, reframe the objection, and advance the conversation. But if you understand that they are actually too busy and it is valid, explore why. Why are they too busy? And then utilize that, reframe the actual conversation into why your solution is going to solve that problem for you. It's again all about pain points, and advance the conversation. And then lastly, how did you find me? People are going to ask this when you're doing outbound. And again, you can actually explain how you found them, or you can probe for more information. You can say, oh, aren't you listed on X, Y, and Z? Yes, I am. Okay, that's where we found you. But you could also go for something that's a little bit more sneaky, saying, oh, you were actually referred to us by somebody that we talked to last week. Very simple, very cool way to overcome that objection. Again, advancing the conversation closer to an appointment. And a couple things to think about of why do we actually acknowledge the objection? And we need to acknowledge and validate, because that is going to reduce that defensiveness. If we start causing friction, they're going to have friction and they're not going to go out and book an appointment. Why do we reframe the objection? It all comes down to the curiosity gap, and reframing objections of what makes you not interested is going to keep them engaged. And then lastly, we really need to think about what's the overall goal of objection handling and follow-up, and that is the foot in the door effect. That once we have a conversation going, all we need is small, low friction steps closer to the finish line, which is booking an appointment. And then our last part of our flywheel is going to be tracking and scaling. You can see we've used these exact processes in every single one of my businesses. And it is very simple. Tying this all together, starting with your daily outreach tracking, seeing how much volume that you're actually tracking. You can do this inside of a CRM. You could do this inside of Google Sheets. Then track your replies. You can use Notion. Track your actual meeting sets. If you're booking inside a high level, you could shoot all of those sets to an outbound tracker. Now, the biggest thing with that is your feedback loop and data tracking to reinforce your behavior and helping refine your scripts. What message actually got them to book? And if you got a booked appointment, we need to look at what message was used so that we can go back and adjust our messaging to increase our booking rate. But you're only going to be able to do that easily if you have a CRM that you're tracking with. From there, we can get into our end of day tracking, where we are going to get a summary of what's going on. And we can do this with our employees in terms of the gamification psychology. What were your daily numbers? What were your wins? So that we can give them motivation to continuously do more outreach, get more wins, and improve their outreach. And one of the biggest things that we do is we give a bonus based off of their wins. So they are motivated to improving the script and booking more appointments. So from there, we have our daily tracking, but we also need to analyze everything on a weekly basis. What are the response rates? What are the conversion rates? And at the end of the week, we're able to get into our monthly scaling objective, which this is going to be looking at everything from a big picture. How much revenue did all of this actually generate? And what are our monthly numbers? And then what we can do is we can evaluate, okay, we have these VAs, and scaling with VAs makes sense. And we could hire more VAs to increase our outreach, but can we implement automation anywhere? Is that something that we can do to help our VAs increase their numbers without making another hire? And then tying those two things is going to allow you to double, triple your outbound and book more appointments at the end of the day, increasing your revenue. And then lastly, is stay on your toes, explore new channels. If you can be the first one in a new channel where you have a lot of attention, you can capitalize on it and book a lot of appointments. So those are the 8 frameworks of our 8-piece flywheel that we call Outbound Elite, where you have a real world prospecting and appointment setting system that actually works. But you need to understand the principle of why this actually works. And then wrapping everything up, I do have a little bit of a challenge for you. I want you over the next 7 days to book 3 to 5 meetings with cold prospects using the bait and switch and spear phishing script that I went over in the third spoke of our flywheel. And then from there, document your flows and outcomes. And what I invite you to do is join our school. It's only $17 a month. The link will be down below, and share your wins of what it looks like doing outbound correctly, using our flywheel, and being able to scale something that is an unshakable way to generate leads and appointments for your business. You'll never have to spend $1 on ads. You'll never have to worry about your next appointment coming in, because it becomes a predictable machine of you doing X amount of daily outbound, getting Y in return in terms of appointments, giving your sales team more sales calls, and scaling your business.